please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Supplemental. Some criminals actually receive a sentence that is moderately passable by our own rigorous standards. Today we intend to test that with a topic that is dark enough to warrant a pre-video warning. Consider this that, by the way. Hello everyone, welcome to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome inmates number 172 to the ISO cubes. Inmates number 172's name is Connor Chapman. Connor Chapman is going to be here for what will seem to be to him the rest of his life, and rightfully so. His crimes are well documented within the UK news, featuring heavily much like that of Lucy Letby. The only difference is Connor Chapman is in prison. Lucy Letby has been held in prison, but she's not been found guilty yet at time of recording in the middle of July. Connor Chapman, for his rather young age, is a career criminal, a useless one at that. The type that built up in the severity of his crimes until he committed the ultimate crime and betrayal. So for this video I'm going to tell you a bit about the prick, the crimes that he committed, all of them by the way, the earliest to the most heinous, to the trial, the sentence, perhaps some of the law as well, and our sentence. Because I think there's a very clear distinction here. And I'm sure many of you, once you find out what Connor Chapman did, provided you didn't just go Google him, you will have your own interpretation of what he should be exacted to, punished with. So let us start by telling you a little bit about who inmates number 172 is. Connor Chapman, at the age of 18, was locked up for 8 months at Liverpool Crown Court. He was from Birkenhead. After he had pled guilty to dangerous driving, aggravated vehicle taking, driving while disqualified, and breaching a criminal behaviour order. After a high-speed police chase, he hid in undergrowth. After he'd stolen an Audi S3, hitting speeds of 60 miles per hour, heading down the wrong side of the road. The judge during that had said, when you were found, your response was frankly quite pathetic. You said, "I'm waiting for my mate. You have a bad record despite your young age, and you have been given every possible chance. You have no regard at all for other people. It strikes me." So even at the age of 18, he was known and had a criminal record and got 8 months for that. He was also banned from parts of the Wirral, which is part of Merseyside. After serving his time and being released, the police were then trying to track him down, now aged 19, because he'd failed to turn up to court for breaching a criminal behaviour order, because he'd entered the Wirral. Skip ahead to him aged 20. He had, up to this point, accumulated 19 previous convictions for 43 offences. The majority of those were multiple breaches of his ASBO, which is an antisocial behaviour order. It means little or nothing and is considered a badge of honour by chavvy dipshits. The police eventually found him, aged 20 at this point, shacked up in a hotel with his girlfriend. He was sentenced to 10 months in a young offenders institution on the 10th of January 2020. This was for possessing a bladed article, handling stolen goods, driving while disqualified, and breaching the earlier mentioned criminal behaviour order, which replaced ASBOs. How he'd managed to breach it was that when he was released from custody, the license he was released on was due to expire on November 12th. 2 months earlier in August, he dropped out of contact with his offender manager, which led to the recall on the 16th of September. A letter was then sent to his nans on the Isle of Man, which was his last known address. He's such a classy bitch, he got his nan dragged into this. Speaks volumes really, doesn't it now? As far as these go, these crimes, while serious, escalate as time goes by, because he doesn't care about the law, so he's willing to push the boundaries further, and there is a point to that. He clearly doesn't care about any family he has, and he doesn't care about rules put in place, so he must change or become something better. The cliché young man who thinks himself invincible and above the law. There isn't much information beyond the fact he has 43 offences to his record, and 19, now 20, convictions. But in the space of 5 years, he had done that. 5 years. That's what he managed to do, which is a damning statement of society as well for failing him when he had the chance to be better, and himself for making every wrong choice and not trying to be better. With this, we now need to talk about what got him put in prison for effectively the rest of his life. For this, we now need to talk about L. Edwards. For the next part to make sense, we need to talk about the fact that Connor Chapman was part of the Woodchurch Estate organised crime group. He had in late October of 2022 been served with an interim injunction order to prevent gang-related violence. It included requirements not to enter the Woodchurch or Beechwood estate and not to associate with other individuals called Jake Duffy, Kieran Solkeld and Sam Searson. On the 16th of November 2022, a further interim injunction order is served under the same terms. In truth, it did bugger all to stop him committing further burglaries in late October and November. On the 3rd of December 2022, one of those people he stole electric bikes with, Curtis Bryan, is shot on the Woodchurch estate. Kieran Cowley, another person that helped him steal stuff, was shot outside a property on Newark Close, near the house of Mason Smith, with the same Glock pistol used to shoot Mr. Byrne. This gang violence is the prelude to what happens next. On the 23rd of December 2022, Chapman left his home on Horton Road in a stolen Mercedes and travelled with Thomas Waring to the Robin Hood Caravan Park in North Wales. After spending half an hour in the caravan park, Chapman returned and parked the Mercedes in a car park at the rear of his home, where it remained for almost 24 hours. On the 24th, Christmas Eve, at 8:44 p.m, the stolen Mercedes is driven away from the car park behind the house. At 8:57, the car is parked up on Green Lane facing the Lighthouse pub. At 9:20, the Mercedes is parked in the Lighthouse car park and is seen on CCTV there. At 10:17, after moving the car a short distance up the road, the driver gets out and walks towards the United Reformed Church, which has a car park next to the Lighthouse car park. Again, CCTV. At 10:30 p.m, the driver walks back towards the car and then past the Lighthouse pub, appearing to crouch down and look towards the pub from the road to the side. 10:54, the driver walks back to the Mercedes and drives it to the pub car park, parking in an empty bay facing the entrance where it remained for 50 minutes. At 11:47 p.m, L. Edwards walks out to the front of the Lighthouse. Up to this point, she was seen on CCTV happily chatting to her friends. At one point, she even left for a period to go to another pub before dropping her sister, Lucy, off at home and returning to the Lighthouse. At 11:47, when she went outside the pub, she went for a cigarette, as she was seen chatting to other people. Chapman was loitering in the car park at this point. At 11:49, the driver of the Mercedes, Thomas Waring, gets out of the car and ducks between vehicles as he moves before running across the car park to the side wall of the pub. At 11:51, the gunman, as they are now known, walks along the side of the building, and at 11:52 fires 12 shots from the Scorpion submachine gun that they were carrying, this one by the way, which killed L. Edwards, injured Kieran Solkeld, Jake Duffy, Harry Loughran, Liam Carr and Nicholas Speed. The gunman then ran back to the Mercedes and drove away from the pub. In the hours after the shooting on December the 25th, at 12:03 a.m, the Mercedes arrives at Private Drive, Barnston, where Thomas Waring lived. The driver parks nearby and walks towards Waring's house, at one point ruffling his hair and appearing to drop what was alleged to be the gun used in the shooting. Following phone calls with his father, Thomas Waring, who had been at his friend's, takes a taxi home to Private Drive, where he arrives just before 1 a.m. At 3:47 a.m, the gunman leaves the house and adjusts the position of the car, moving it towards Waring's house. At 5:21, a taxi ordered from Private Drive arrives back close to Chapman's home, and a man is seen walking to the back of the house and then to the front. Skipping ahead to New Year's Eve, Connor Chapman drives to Frodsham, which is in Cheshire, where the stolen Mercedes used in the murder is burnt out and discovered the following day. On New Year's Day 2023, police go to the house of Chapman's grandparents. An officer speaks to him over the phone and asks him to hand himself in. Chapman does not use that phone again. On the 9th of January, he travels to Wales in a hire car and stays in a lodge. On the 10th of January, he is arrested at a Tesco in Newtown, Wales. Connor had described this holiday he was on as a romantic getaway with his girlfriend. Nothing reeks of romantic more than popping off to Tesco to get a meal deal. When they arrested him, they caught him at the checkout and they swarmed him to make sure there was no chance of escape. So now you know what happened. Now we need to move on to the trial of Connor Chapman, aka Inmate number 172. Right off the bat, the very first thing we learn during the trial is that L. Edwards was not an intended target. This was entirely a gang-related fight. The intended targets, Jake Duffy and Kieran Solkeld, were the intended targets, yet they lived. L. Edwards had nothing to do with any of that at all. In fact, her entire reason for going out was part of a tradition where they would go, her sister as well, and others, to go and enjoy themselves at the same place. This was confirmed early on in the trial by her sister, who had told the court the last thing she had sent to her sister was not to be late home after dropping her off via text message. Connor Chapman was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and of course the charge of murder. He also denied possession of a Scorpion submachine gun with intent to endanger life, possession of ammunition with intent to endanger life. Co-defendant Thomas Waring denied possessing a prohibited weapon and assisting an offender by helping Chapman to dispose of the car. There are other charges as well concerning the theft of that car, but the main focus should be on the murder, attempted murder, and possession, and intent. During the trial, Nigel Power, KC prosecuting, told the jury gun crime often includes criminals shooting at each other. There's no doubt this is such an event, but of course here, a young, beautiful, unconnected, innocent life was brutally ended as a direct result of the then ongoing, but for now at least paused, gun feud between the Ford estate and the Woodchurch estate. Chapman, throughout the entire 3-week trial, claimed he was innocent, and at the time he was at home all night of the shooting, telling the jury that although he accepted his friend Byrne had been shot, Curtis Byrne that is, he wasn't angry about it and had no plan for revenge. He accepted he was a drug dealer with a long list of previous convictions, but told the jury, "I wouldn't say I'm an expert criminal. I'm not proud of what I've done. I'm not trying to portray myself in any kind of way. I've not said one good word about myself. I've told the truth and nothing but the truth." That sounds like a movie quote. How quaint. However, Nigel Power said that CCTV evidence showed someone leaving Chapman's home at 8:31 p.m. and getting into the stolen Mercedes 12 minutes later. A combination of CCTV and automatic number plate recognition cameras tracked the Mercedes to the village where it stayed until the shooting. Afterwards, the jury heard the car was tracked to Private Drive, the home address of Thomas Waring. CCTV from Private Drive showed a figure with long hair walking along and dropping the gun, which skidded along the floor. A taxi booked by Waring under a fake name and with a vague pickup point took Chapman home to Woodchurch around 5 a.m. on Christmas morning. The pair then took steps to cover up their vile crime by driving in convoy to a remote spot off Grassy Lane on New Year's Eve to torch the Mercedes. Chapman accepted he had access to the car for weeks before the unaliving, but claimed it was a pool car used by him and others mainly for drug dealing. He had said that a man who called him shortly before he left to travel had arranged to take the car that evening and sent an underling to pick up the keys. The jury heard Chapman accepted he burned the car out, but claimed this was after he figured out it had been used in the shooting and because he knew he was forensically linked to it. For Thomas Waring, he refused to give evidence, which Power, KC, that guy, the prosecutor, called the ultimate in cowardice. Thomas Waring told his barrister, William England, to suggest to Chapman that he did in fact travel to Waring's house after midnight, effectively shredding his defense. However, Thomas Waring's case was that although his phone was tracked on the journey to burn out the car, someone else was using it and he was not involved. But because he refused to give any evidence, the jury never heard any more from him. Much of what happened next, though, was not disputed. After initially preparing to flee to Santander in Spain via car ferry, Chapman's plans fell apart because a search warrant was executed and the home of his grandparents was searched. In a call from his grandparents' home, a police sergeant asked him to hand himself in for questioning over a serious matter, which he refused. Instead, he asked a friend to book a stay for him and his partner in North Wales, which is then how he got busted. Fun little fact though, the murder weapon itself was never recovered. The investigation revealed Chapman's DNA in a mixed sample on a bullet casing found at the scene, along with it being on a red glove recovered from Thomas Waring's home, which matched one the gunman was wearing. A single particle of gunshot residue was also present on the glove. I love DNA, because unlike people, it doesn't lie. After 3 weeks of playing back video footage, CCTV footage where the family of L. Edwards saw this over and over again, with Connor Chapman denying everything at every opportunity, Thomas Waring refusing to take account, to defend himself or perhaps be honest, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty to all charges. With this, we now go to the sentence. For the charge of murder, which essentially supersedes everything else, the sentence is minimum life, which is at least 25 years. In the case of Thomas Waring, he got 9 years because of his involvement in the burning of the car. So we can immediately discard him because he's just the twat that got involved when he shouldn't have. The main focus is Connor Chapman, irrespective of his not guilty pleas and adamant belief that he is innocent of everything, while writing a cringy rap song in prison, which essentially made him look even more guilty. He was sentenced to life. Now, in mitigation, his defense said, no, we're not doing this. But because he's not 25, he was 23 at the time, a whole life order was considered. His defense did point out, you typically don't give that to somebody who is not fully developed, so before the age of 25, it doesn't happen. It was his defense's belief that once he turns 25, he'll finally be able to understand the gravitas of what he has done. The judge accepted this, and upon giving him his sentence, decided, I may not give you a whole life order, but I'm going to give you a sentence with a minimum that is long enough that you're going to think it is one. Connor Chapman, inmate number 172, to the joy of L. Edwards' family, was sentenced to life with a minimum tariff of 48 years. By the time he is even considered for parole, he will be 72. Connor Chapman has 2 children that will be in their middle ages by the time he is released. One of them doesn't even know he exists, and it's probably best to keep it that way. By the way, that cringy rap song, here's some lyrics for you. If I make it out of here, I'm due to become famous. Because if you touch one of mine, I'll leave your soul on the pavement. The family of L. Edwards did speak outside the court. They did also read victim impact statements during the sentencing hearing. But I'm going to play a short clip of L. Edwards' father speaking outside court after the sentence was passed. I think this is a suitable way to end the video, and I think in retrospect, the Edwards family deserve to have the final say.
We know that you want to talk tomorrow, but just your reactions now to what's happened in court today.
Well, we got the result we wanted, justice for Ellie. So it's always been about. Those 2 cowards in there decided to drag it out for 4 weeks, put all these people through that, and everyone else around it involved in the case. Can't thank the police enough for what they did, and we got there in the end, and the right results. And you know what? I hope them 2 never see another Christmas again ever in their lives.
And the doc, he tried to keep his head so that he couldn't see you.
I've had my eyes on him for 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4, however long it's been, and he has not looked at me once because he's a coward.